her finding a place out on her backyard or somewhere, and she's sitting on a bench, and there's no other sound but some birds chirping, and it's just quiet. And they pan in, you see a Bible beside her on the seat, and she's got a cup of coffee or tea in her hand, and she's just at peace, at rest, as she escapes the turmoil. So hopefully that kind of painted the picture there for the rest of that video. So if you notice something is a little different, something's a little different, I'm kind of excited. Somebody is up here with me today.
Good morning, good morning.
My name is Ed.
I'm the bright. Wow, okay, hi. They really all do disappear.
Oh, yeah, in the lights.
Okay, that's good to know.
My name is Ed. I'm the formation and executive pastor here at Converge, and this is my friend of years, wife of weeks.
Hi, Kim.
There you go. And we're thrilled. We are really excited to be here with you guys today and to be able to share what God has put in our heart as we kind of move into this next month's teaching series. We'll explain that here in a minute.
Yeah, like as you were saying, wife of weeks, we've had a lot going on. And, just this weekend, we went and we visited friends and family in Portland. And so we got up insanely early.
2:30. It was a whirlwind 2 days here.
I know. Did we even go to bed? I don't know.
It was kind of an all-nighter.
Yes, it was bright in the morning. And so we had to figure out, I think one of my first questions was, what time do I actually have to leave the house? Because it was so early. So then it was, okay, we got to leave the house at this time. We got to get to we got to park the car because we were staying overnight.
We left 10 minutes early. We thought, man, we were doing really, really good until we got to just past
we
Vineyard.
were on Calvine. Yeah.
Yeah, on Calvine.
Yeah.
And a train, the things go down for the train, and it's moving at 10 miles per hour.
It was the longest train.
And then it stopped, and we're looking at each other like, we're going to miss our plane. This is not going to work for us. Finally, it kind of starts up again. That was a 12-minute wait
your heart
for that
rate
train.
just goes, yeah, it was.
So getting to the airport was a little nerve-wracking.
Yes, it was. And then we had to figure out the parking, but I think I let you drive because it was so early in the morning. And then, so it's like ridiculously early. We show up at security, and it is the longest security line I have ever seen. I'm like, who else
deep,
flies?
literally all the way back to the tram.
They are line. But
you're not gonna make
the TSA, oh no, they start later. So there's one security person, one line for the 8 rows of people getting through, and I'm just like, oh, this is.
Now, fortunately, Kim was really gracious because I never check luggage. I am a carry-on guy. I do not want to check luggage. That is a rare time that I'm ever going to have luggage to check.
And I check
She
luggage.
checks her carry-on.
Constantly.
And I'm like, oh, okay, well, but
I
you
am
braved
5'2". Nobody feels safe when they see me pick up my luggage, put it over their head, and try to get it in. That person is terrified in that moment. Their eyes are like saucers.
I had you.
Yes.
So we did this together.
You were very nice. Yes.
And, so we get to security, hurry to the gate, got to get a coffee. Of course, then you got to hit the bathroom in the terminal.
Oh, yeah.
Because the other thing when I fly is I will never use an airplane bathroom. I won't. I refuse. It's not going to happen. I don't care how long the flight is. I'm not doing that. So you got to go when you can. So you got to all sorts of stuff.
We better move on.
Okay, we're moving.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Yes. All right. So finally, we're on that plane though. We've made it through. And you know the drill. You get the safety from the stewardess, but the pilot comes on and says, okay, it's time to go into airplane mode. Take all your devices and turn them off. Shut down, pack them all away. You can't have anything out on your seat next to you. Your big device, your little device. It all goes into airplane mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the airplane mode, it gives us a chance then to actually really do non-essential stuff.
Yes.
Right? Because we can't be on our phones, in theory, unless we're, hiding it down here like you do. And then somebody else gets to take on the responsibility for doing the big jobs.
Right. You got your pilot. They're taking care of everything. You're no longer even the navigator. You are just sitting there letting somebody else
serves you
all of it.
Right?
Yes.
In airplane mode, then we just unplug. In airplane mode, we can just sit back and relax and just do other things. I do reading, I play
Yeah.
puzzle games, and yeah, sometimes you can put your devices on, and I worked on the computer a little bit, but
You
all
sleep.
in all, that gives us an opportunity.
Yes. Yes.
So let's pray. We're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to use this idea of airplane mode this month to talk about what it means to unplug a little bit from life. So let's pray here. Jesus, we just invite you into our hearts. You are the teacher right here. Not Kim, not I. Your Spirit is the one who leads and guides and teaches us. So I pray that you're at work in us so that the concepts that we're trying to convey this morning become very resonant in us and in our lives because we so desperately need this and we need you. And we just praise you for that. Amen. So this month we start a series with that very name, Airplane Mode.
Yes.
It's about turning off the busyness, the apps of life, and finding a way to then get alone with Jesus.
Yes.
Like we last week, if you were here, was kind of a bridge into what we're doing this month. It's called Airplane Mode. Last month we talked about the person of Jesus in some very cool ways. This month we're talking about the practices of Jesus. So it's not just about airplane mode, it's about how Jesus did airplane mode. And we really want to highlight that for you guys today.
Right. So we're going to talk about three main themes and practices, and I love that they are called practices. This is not something that you're going to feel comfortable with immediately.
They're not perfect.
Okay, that's right. This isn't like an I got it. It's an I'm practicing this.
Yes.
So, and those are Sabbath, solitude, and silence. Those are going to be our big three themes.
Yep. Sabbath, solitude, and silence. And we want you to understand how Jesus practiced these three things. But before we do that, we should probably
let's
help explain them a
define
little
that
bit.
a little bit. So in Sabbath, we're not thinking just about the day, but we're thinking of the attitude, of the way that we enter into a Sabbath. And so we're going to think about this in the idea of rest, remember, and renew. That's how you know that you are Sabbathing, okay? When you feel your body go into rest. When you can feel that you are remembering who Jesus is, and when you can walk out of that time feeling renewed. That's how you know that you've Sabbathed.
Yeah. And then solitude is very similar to it. Solitude doesn't mean that I'm just all by myself. Many times I am with Jesus when I Sabbath, but we can Sabbath together. Some of us could Sabbath together because it's less about me just being by myself, and solitude means more about it's without distractions.
Yeah.
That I don't have a lot of noise and a lot of input coming in, and so I'm kind of like away and shut out from some of the noise and busyness that goes with my life, and I'm sequestered with God, even if I'm with some people. And we'll see how Jesus did that.
Right, and that's why I so love the airplane analogy, because you feel like you're alone on the plane, but you're not alone on the plane. That's that solitude thing. And then the third one would be silence. And it's not so much that we're asking you to go without noise, as it is that we're asking you to go without setting the agenda. Learning to let our will go into silence so that we can hear what Jesus and the Holy Spirit has to say to us. That's what makes silence so unique.
So if we take these three ideas, Sabbath, solitude, and silence, and put them together and into one kind of idea, which is where we're going today, it's going to kind of sound like this. It is, these practices are undistracted time alone with Jesus to remember and reflect and renew. I'll say it again. Undistracted time alone with Jesus to remember, reflect, and renew. And Jesus had a lot of these moments.
He did. So we're going to go through some of the scriptures because usually these are the little sentences that we skip over so quickly that we don't even realize that they're there. But there are actually so many of them there. So it's very common that you will find in Matthew, Mark, and Luke sentences that sound like this one. At times, he went away by himself to be alone.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it just spells it out. And we're going to take a look at a bunch of scriptures this morning, and then we're going to kind of wrap it all up.
Yeah.
But we want to see, because when I really started researching for this, I mean, I knew the Gospels would talk about Jesus doing Sabbath, solitude, and silence, doing these practices of unplugging. But I didn't realize how much the Bible actually talks about this, which tells me how important it was to not just Jesus, but to his followers and to the authors of these books, of the Gospels. Like, you got to know this.
Yeah.
Jesus' ministry and Jesus' life was filled with these moments of unhurriedly and undistractedly getting alone with his Father God so that he could be ready for his life.
Right, and you see them as a routine, as a rhythm, and really a go-to when Jesus' life gets crazy.
Yeah.
You see him start to use it.
So let's look at Luke 6:12. Here's an example. It says in Luke 6:12, it says, he went to the mountain to pray. So there's Jesus, right, by himself, going to a mountain to pray. And all night, he continued in prayer to God. And then I believe, like, his disciples would watch him. Like, they could see him kind of wander off, you know, and they kind of knew, okay, Jesus is kind of going to do his thing. And then, like, that next morning, he kind of comes back to camp where they all are. And they see him do this practice, and they know he's out there talking to God.
Yeah. And then in Mark chapter 1, verse 12, it says, at once the Spirit led Jesus out into the desert, and he was in the desert 40 days, being tempted by Satan. He was with the wild animals, and the angels attended to him.
This verse kind of takes us right back to where everything starts at the beginning, right when Jesus gets out of his baptism.
Yeah.
Before he does any more life, before he does any ministry, before he does any healings, before he does any miracles, Jesus is like, I got to get away. I've got to do some silence and Sabbath and solitude time just to prepare myself for the next 3.5 years, just to prepare myself for what lies ahead. And so he sneaks away into the desert, and it's a time of fasting, and it's just him and Jesus, him and God. And it's also a time of tempting. And it's just a really important time. We see, like, right off the bat, it's so important. It becomes his very first priority.
I know, and I can't help but think about, when you're right on the brink of starting something new, of a new ministry, a new job, a new relationship.
A new family.
No. And then, but there might be this need to get away, though, at the same time. That you take all that momentum and all that enthusiasm, and that, though, you can still lay at the feet of Jesus and give that to him, and to know that you have started a new season of ministry, of your life, in complete surrender, knowing that God is there walking you with it and just next to you into the new things.
Moving towards into Mark 1, chapter 1, verse 35, it says this about Jesus right as he's getting started in his ministry. It says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up and left the house, went to a solitary place where he prayed. Let me set the stage very quickly here. So he gets out of the wilderness, and he calls a few disciples, and he goes to Peter's mother-in-law's house. She's really sick, and he heals her. Well, then all these neighbors start coming, and he starts doing all these miracles. And into the wee hours of the morning, Jesus is busy laying hands on people, it says, and doing miracles. And so he's working. And then finally everybody kind of goes home, calls it a night, and he sneaks off.
Yeah.
So then what happens is it's everyone in the morning, everybody's looking for Jesus. And the disciples are all like, let's go. Let's keep doing this, man. Okay, something's happening. Jesus, we're getting an audience. We're getting famous. Come on, here we go. And Jesus is able to say, no, I've been with my Father, and we're supposed to go to another village. Those are like the next few verses there. And how does he know that? He only knows that because he spent time with Jesus in Sabbath and solitude and silence, so he knew where to go next in his ministry.
I know there are so many moments in life and in ministry and in our professions where timing is essential. And we can get out of sync with what God is doing when we are not spending these times in solitude, in silence, and in Sabbath with him. But we see that Jesus always has this perfect, God-driven timing because he takes the time to hear what God has next for him and never just assumes what's next.
Exactly. Well, let's keep moving forward here.
So the next one says, where am I? Okay, there I am. Okay, despite Jesus' plea that his miracles be kept secret, the news about him spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to the lonely places and prayed.
That last sentence says a lot. But Jesus often, so how many times did he do that? He did it a lot, often.
Yeah.
Withdrew to lonely places, plural.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like it was a one-off. Jesus would do this once in a great while, maybe 2 or 3 times in his entire ministry. No, the gospel writer wants us to know he did it a lot, often withdrew to many places in many ways so that he could be alone with God.
Yeah, and when I hear that, I think about this idea that it was based on his relationship with God, not a location where he met with God.
Right.
We can get so caught up in, I need to go here so I can pray, or I always pray at this place in this time, or I'm always in church on a Sunday morning because that's where I meet with Jesus. But we see this idea that when you have this strong, robust relationship with the Lord, it can happen anywhere in multiple places.
Looking again into Mark chapter 2, verse 13 says this, once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. Now, I have been, like when I read this, typically I would just say, okay, they've located Jesus, and whatever happens next, I know where he is at. But the author, it's what he doesn't say. The author doesn't say his disciples were with him. And the author doesn't say the crowd was with him, because the authors are really good at making sure if the disciples or the crowd were with Jesus, it'll say it.
Yeah.
So I now picture Jesus by himself walking along the lake as he hears the water lap up and he hears the birds chirp and maybe he sees a fish splash out in the lake, and he's by himself talking to God before the next verse happens.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed.
Now here's the crowd.
Here they come. They're going to find him.
Yep. And so now here he is at the lake, and here they are. And Jesus finds himself there a lot. But notice that he withdrew with his disciples. This here is the first mention, and you'll see other verses mentioned, that Jesus Sabbaths with his disciples, and he Sabbaths alone. He does them both. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a practice. And I think it's because, I'll just say it now, that Jesus is trying to teach his disciples how to do a Sabbath. I think he wants them to be with him. So if he does it all by himself, they never get to watch what he does or hear what he prays. But if they get to be with him in a Sabbath, they learn this important practice. Disciples need to be Sabbathing, probably even more so, without Jesus, active, because they're not walking, he walks with us in spirit.
Right.
But it's something for his disciples to learn.
I know, and I'm excited because as we go into a Sabbath time as a church body, you guys are going to be not alone in it as well. You will have resources that will guide you through, that will model this for you. So make sure that you get that today.
Jesus in Luke and in Mark 3:13 also, as we just keep walking through the scriptures, this one says, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. And then when morning came, he calls his disciples. Once again, we see Jesus spending a lot of time with God. Here's another overnight time where he does that. I mean, he was just, it was so necessary for him to spend time.
Yeah. When Jesus heard that John the Baptist had been beheaded, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. And to really understand what's happening here in this, we have to remember, going back to what we learned in Luke, that, John the Baptist is Jesus' cousin. We know the story of the beheading was a tragic injustice that was done out of jealousy, and now this great man has been killed horribly, humiliating. And Jesus finds out about it. And sometimes life does that to us, where we hear about tragedy that happens to people close to us. And we don't always know how to respond or what to do and how to process all the flood of emotions that can hit us out of left field and come at us so hard. But when we have these routines and this rhythm of I go to Jesus and he meets me there, then the curveballs of life, we have a practice. We know what to do in these moments where we can say, I can take a breath. I know where I can meet with my God who loves me and the God who heals me, and I will be okay because he will walk me through this.
Moving to Mark 7, verse 24, Karen, I'm skipping a couple. It says, Jesus entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. I think there are times we struggle to get away. There are times, like in our video, that mom, I know you didn't get to see the end, where she does finally find a place. But she was just go, go, go. Right from the minute the alarm clock set off,
Yes.
she had all this stuff to do on her checklist. And sometimes it's hard to find that spot or that place, especially if it's not a part of our routine of life. And so, Jesus struggled with that too. Understand that Jesus tried to find places, and sometimes the press of life just crowded in, which is why Jesus would keep practicing, because sometimes it didn't always go the way he wanted.
Yeah. One day, Jesus was praying in private, and his disciples were with him, and he asked them, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" And what I love about this particular verse that calls out Jesus was praying is it reminds us that we're in those moments of prayer with Lord. That's where we remember who we are. You can be bombarded by the busyness of life and the demands that are put on us, and our identity can start to come from those things. But when we spend the time consistently, routinely, rhythmically returning to Jesus and what he says about us in those moments of silence, it is so much easier to remember who we are. It is so much easier to say, I am a child of God who loves me, because we have spent time sitting with him, letting him speak that over to us.
Yeah, it's really good. In Mark chapter 9, we see the transfiguration story. And this verse stands out, Mark 9:2. It says, Jesus, so he took Peter, James, and John. So here he's not with every disciple, all of his 12. He's just with his inner three. And he said they went with him, and he led them up a high mountain where they were alone. And in that Sabbath, when they were together, he transfigures, or he is changed in appearance and form to be glorified, to look like divinity.
Yeah.
And they get to witness this. To me, it speaks to something powerful that happens in Sabbath.
That's right. We get to see a completely different side of who Jesus is when we're with him one-on-one. We can do our best to present to you who we know Jesus to be,
Right.
But when he presents to you who you need him to be and who he is to you, that's when your heart is transformed. Those are the moments that shift you from one season to the next, because you have seen a God that you haven't seen before, but who knows exactly what you need in those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then they went to a place called Gethsemane. And Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray."
Also here, I want to back one up, Karen. In Mark 14 and Luke 22, it says this. It says, when Jesus and his disciples had sung a hymn, they had went to the Mount of Olives. This was Jesus' usual place. Jesus just didn't hang up everywhere. He had a few favorite places. He did this so frequently and so often that he would have places where he would want to go and get away to spend time with them. And that's when he was in Jerusalem, here's my Sabbath spot. And I will make time to make sure that I get alone with God in this special place. There are lots and lots of other verses in the Gospels that talk about this, but hopefully you've heard enough scriptures to get an idea, a picture of how frequently and how important Sabbath was to Jesus, this solitude and silence time, to get alone with God. Of course, we as followers of Jesus talk about Sabbathing with Jesus, being with him like his disciples were with him, or he would take his disciples with him to learn to pray, to learn to be alone, to learn to talk to God, to learn to be with him and learn from him. It was so important. And as we went through this, there are kind of like three themes that popped out to us that we want to just quickly kind of go over with you today as we understand or try to understand, why is Sabbath solitude silence? This idea of this unhindered, this time alone, this undivided heart time with Jesus. Why is this so crucially important? And what do we do here? As followers of Jesus, we got to do this. And so we want to give you three themes this morning to help you kind of tie it all together. And the first one is this: time with Jesus is unhurried.
That's right. This
Unhurried.
is time when we slow down.
Slow
You know,
down.
the video did such a good
Just speeding things up.
Yes, you
Exactly.
hear the dun 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 dun, and that life can feel like that, but
Yeah.
but when we take that time to step aside, we can get into the slowing down, the unhurriedness that
Yeah.
the spirit world offers us.
So a lot of the verses that we read with you this morning are from Mark. Mark's such an interesting gospel because he uses a lot of immediacy language, like immediately, right now, the very next thing. Mark is full of that. If you read Mark, you constantly see Mark like, hurry up, get there, go, go, go. And yet then he pauses to show Jesus slowing down and being unhurried and Sabbathing and showing that contrast. You don't know he's doing that as an author, but he is, so that we can learn this idea from him.
Yeah.
Jesus, and what we're learning through that is Jesus was unhurried. There was so much ministry to do. He could have been so popular in ways beyond what the scriptures don't show, but he was very unhurried. He could just sit there like last week with a woman at a well and have a conversation and not be like, I gotta go, this is a checkbox thing in my life. And he could just hang out and have extended times of prayer.
Right, and I think that really speaks to the attitude in which Jesus entered into these times. And for us, it's going to be the same thing. As we decide to take our Sabbath moments and our time of silence and solitude, it's going to be about the attitude in which you enter into that space. And we have to remember that it's not about duration. Okay, but it's about the attitude of when we are there. Because as we start these practices, 5 minutes might feel like a really long time.
It will feel like a long time.
Just sit in silence, to turn your phone, leave it in the other room. It's going to feel like a long time. And so it's remembering that it's the attitude that we're entering this with of, I'm here as long as it takes, as long as you'll speak to me, as long as I can listen. This is how long I'm going to be here.
I think one of the things we wrestle with is because we know the need to unplug. We know the need to rest.
We do.
But I think a lot of the times we're using entertainment. I want to just veg in front of the TV. I'll just turn on the sports channel. I'm just going to kind of like sit here in my chair, put the things up or whatever, pull my ottoman out, and I'm just going to veg. I'm going to grab something cold from the refrigerator, and I'm just going to hang. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm known to do that.
Right. Yes.
But we can't say that entertainment is rest and rest is entertainment.
Yeah, that is one thing that I think our culture has really connected and that we need to intentionally disconnect, is when am I resting versus when am I being entertained?
Yeah, and we do relax, but time with Jesus is a different kind of rest. Time with Jesus is a rest that fills our heart and our soul. It's a rest that rejuvenates us so that we have something to give out of, so that it's not just like, oh, I'm less tired than I was, but I've got something of Jesus in me, more of what I had than when I went into that moment, so that I can pour out of that to my kids, to my spouse, to coworkers, to extended family, to my neighbors. I've got something I can give out of, and that is why we need to be unhurried so we can spend that time with Jesus in rest and reflection.
Right. And then the second theme that this is kind of leading into is this idea that time with Jesus is unhindered.
Unhindered. We're kind of back to that idea that says no distractions. It's not hindered by a lot of noise, a lot of input that is like giving a spiritual Sabbath ADD of like, oh, I got this and I got this, and well, there's this, and I'm trying to do that, but then there's this, and I think of this thing, and
right. And so that's one of the reasons too why I like the analogy of airplane mode. This idea that you're going to turn off as many applications as you have in life so that way we can make space for something else.
So like the husband app and the kid app.
Just
and
silence. We silence. We'll figure this out. But this idea that we're going to spend quality time with Jesus.
Yeah, quality. So my youngest daughter is a quality time girl. And I've had to learn and grow in, fortunately, the idea that I love just some quality time with people. Quality time isn't quantity. Quality time is not even about what we do. It's that what we're doing is us, and we are two things. Number one, being intentional. It's like we're making time. I'm taking space. I'm giving part of me to you in this moment, and that is quality. And I'm giving you some of my best, that quality. And then the second thing is that I'm fully present with you. I mean, it would be really distracting. I know that this would not be good. I know this would not be good, so I don't do this mostly. But, you're trying to talk to me and I've got my phone out.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm looking at news, or I'm looking at something, or I'm playing Royal Flush or Candy Crush or some other game, and I'm trying to do, and you're trying to talk to me, and I'm like, yeah. Something that I'm really, really good at, and Kimberly knows this, is when I hear you say something, if I'm not present with you fully, I have really gotten skilled at repeating the last line to you. So if you were to say, you're not listening, I could totally repeat the last line back to you, and you'd be like, oh, I guess he is.
Yeah.
No.
No.
That was a skill I learned, and it was not really helpful, and it was a little deceitful.
Yes.
But so what do I do now?
So yeah, you have got to now you put the phone upside down. You'll put your watch in the other room, because a group text can be the death of an evening.
If you spend quality time with me,
it really can.
And some of you guys have, right? You'll see me. We'll sit at a table. We'll be at Starbucks, and my phone will be upside down on the table, so I can't even see it go if it goes, because I want to be present in the moment with that person.
Yeah.
That's quality time.
Yes.
And that's what this time with Jesus is.
Right. And in the scriptures we read that Jesus, he did teach his disciples this as well. And one of the things that has always struck me as I've read through the different gospels is this idea of there's a crowd and then there's disciples. And how do you know if you are part of the crowd or if you're one of the disciples?
That's a good question.
And the disciples always were alone with Jesus. The crowd, they stayed for the food, they stayed for the miracles. When they got tired, they went home. If there wasn't a party going on, they're out. But the disciples, those are the ones that pursued him just a little bit more. Jesus went to a quiet place. There wasn't a promise of fireworks, of miracles. There was just a person. And they followed the person of Jesus, not just the acts and the extras, but the actual person of Jesus. And that's how you know when you're acting like a disciple, when you're willing to pursue him that little bit more. And the other thing that I love when I've seen this is when you get alone with Jesus and you take that discipling step, that's when your questions get answered. I think about Nicodemus and how he wouldn't ask his question about being born again in public.
No, he was a Pharisee. There's no way he's going to risk that.
Too much. That would have embarrassed him to have to ask such a question. Right. And there's questions that we have of God that we would never raise our hand on a Sunday and say, but Dustin, what about this? But when we're alone with Jesus and we've silenced everything and we've really turned off our distractions, those questions, they can't help but bubble up to the surface. And chances are, if you're resisting this idea of meeting one-on-one with Jesus, it's precisely because you have a question or something in you that you're wondering, I don't know if Jesus can handle that I have this question in my heart. And yet, that is the exact invitation that he is drawing you in to say, let's tackle that together now, in this moment of silence, without the distractions. When the crowd is gone, let's get to that nitty-gritty where I can change you into who you are in Christ.
Okay, that was worth the price of admission right there.
I'm just saying.
That was good.
So anyway.
For real, I've listened to Kim preach before, and sometimes I'm just like,
okay,
wow, where does that come
from?
from?
So the third
that
theme.
Was really, wait, that's me. It's blue. That is me. Time with Jesus is uninhibited.
Yes.
Uninhibited.
Yes. This is that go for it. And I love the disciple Peter. He has so many go for it moments. He is so willing to be the one to say, oh, build your church on me. I won't deny you. And he's the one that when he saw Jesus walking on water, for some reason, he thinks, I can do that too. That is his I want to be like Jesus moment. And he actually gets out of the boat. I mean, come on. Can you imagine having that kind of passion for the person of Jesus that when you see the impossible, you go, I'm all in? And yet right now, as we are sitting here and we're talking about, I'm going to do something radical. I'm not going to go to church on Sunday. I mean, that's our definition of
Well,
radical right now,
yeah.
for these last 2 weeks. But are you willing to get out of the boat? Are you willing to say, I see Jesus sitting over there in solitude. I see this moment of silence. I see what they have provided for me. And do I have the courage to step out, to not be in a recliner on Sunday morning, and to say, I'm going to try to go where Jesus is and meet him in that new, unknown place so that I can stand next to him in a new place.
Okay, so I'm going to push back for a second and say, but the rest of that story is, because when Peter gets out of that boat and he starts walking on the water, it's pretty good for a step or two until Peter gets his eyes off of Jesus and he sees the wind and the waves and he sinks. And
you want to know what
down.
happened?
And so I don't want to get out of the boat because I might sink.
No, and in that moment, Jesus held Peter.
Yeah.
There had to be a moment where in the middle of the sinking, in the middle of, I knew I was going to get wet, I knew this was going to be a mess, we know that Jesus must have held on to Peter and walked him back to his safe spot. And so if you want to be held by God, you have to be willing to risk something, to step out and let Jesus rescue you in those moments.
100%. With time, the things that feel so foreign will begin to feel very familiar.
Yeah.
And all it takes is practice, spiritual practices. It takes the going for it, to be uninhibited, to say, even if I sink, if even if it doesn't go like I thought, even if I have some anxieties, I'm doing this because Jesus' hands will reach to me. And what started as so foreign will soon become very familiar and as needed as drawing breath or oxygen, because that's how we saw it was with Jesus and his Father.
I know, because as we go into that airplane mode, going back to this idea of you board a plane, you turn off all your distractions, you set your attitude for I'm going to spend this time with Jesus, and I don't care how long it takes, I'm going to get there. The most amazing thing happens. You end up in a totally different place spiritually. It is phenomenal, but there is an acceleration that happens. We fly because it takes too long to walk. We fly because we can't get there by car. There are places that the Holy Spirit and Jesus want to take you that you can only get to by going through Sabbath, solitude, and silence.
Yeah.
You will end up in a completely new location. And let me tell you, it is scary as all get out. Because you don't know when you come back, you're going to walk around and things are going to feel a little different because you're going to be different and you're going to be in a new place with Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it exciting.
This month as a church, we don't, this Sunday, next Sunday is actually kind of like part 2. Dustin and Jess will be sharing next Sunday, and they're going to be talking to you about the power of Sabbath. We've set up what Jesus did and why. They're going to show you what it did for them and the power of Sabbath things. So you'll want to catch part 2 next week with them. But this whole month, this whole series is about this airplane mode, the Sabbath experience. And we've been alluding to this end of May thing that we're going to do as a church. And we, at this point, Kim and I want to step off the stage. Dustin wants to share from his heart, too. He isn't able to be here today, but he wants to be able to talk to us about what's going to happen in the last 2 Sundays of May as we kind of wrap this up, because we want to do this together with you. Dustin and I, as pastors, our job is to equip you for ministry, and that means helping do things together, not just to tell you about it, but to hold hands and do it with each other. And it's like, having an all-church prayer meeting. We do it together.
Yeah.
And so this Sabbath thing that we're going to be practicing so that we can all enjoy some of what Kim has been talking to us about this morning. So we invite you now here just to check out this video, listen to Dustin and his invitation to join all of us in doing this Sabbath thing together.
Hello, family. If you're watching this, it's because of one of two reasons. Either you're scrolling across it on social media, in which case, welcome, thanks for stopping, or you scanned a QR code because you showed up to worship with us, but there was no one there. Let me explain. We're doing something we've never done before as a church. In fact, something I've never done before in the history of my church experience, and that is to corporately Sabbath together. You see, we're really doubling down on this idea of having healthy spiritual rhythms, healthy spiritual practices. And spiritual practices, like anything else, like those guitars you see in the corner, if I want to be a good guitar player, I've got to practice. And in the same ways, if we want healthy spiritual rhythms, we have to practice. And so as a church, we've invited our community to really pull away and Sabbath, to work and connect with God out of rest. Well, the Hebrew word for Sabbath is Shabbat, which just simply means to stop. And so we're going to actually stop what we can control, and that is our weekly gathering together as a church to create the space for you to get alone with God, because we think it's just that important. We should work and live and do our relationships out of rest. We've been teaching on this for the last couple of weeks, and now we're going to put it into practice. In addition to that, if Sabbath is going to be a rhythm for us and a value for ours, we need to create the space for our teams and our leaders to have the time to simply rest. In our environment, we're setting up and tearing down. It's a lot of work every week. And so we, as a leadership at Converge, want to say to our team, our directors, and our volunteers, we are so grateful for what you do each and every week. So much so that we want to give you a chance to rest, to do what you do here with Converge out of a place of rest and relaxation. Be with family, take the road trip, sleep in, go take the morning brunch and have a mimosa with your partner or your spouse. These are values to us, and there's a difference in saying these are values and actually demonstrating to our teams this is something that matters to us. So what can you do? Well, come back the first weekend of June so that we can celebrate these Sabbath weekends together. We're gonna get right back to business as usual beginning the first Sunday in June. What else can you do? Well, if you've been a part of our services, we've talked about these Sabbath boxes. Get into the Sabbath box. Do the exercises. We love what we do together each weekend. But that's not nearly going to be enough to help you become the truly devoted Christ follower that we long for our people to be marked as and known by. I hope you'll come back and join us. And until then, over these next 2 weeks, I hope that you'll create the space to really discover just how much Jesus loves you as you get alone with Him. Can't wait to see you soon. Love you, church.